Another day of Miami Dolphins training camp is in the books, and we have you covered for everything that happened at Miami Gardens Baptist Health Training Facility for the Sunday, July 28th, 2024 practice.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs have wound down. The sports have stopped sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a boost or bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Dolphins had their latest practice earlier today. It was the first public practice of the training camp schedule for the Miami Dolphins. The fans were stacked. Tua Tagovailoa hypes up the crowd. Malik Washington does a backflip before things get kicked off. A lot of really entertaining action, some ebb and flow offensive and defensive wins, some elite player battles with a lot of competition amongst one another. So there's a lot to get into. And I will say I'm particularly excited if you're watching on YouTube. I have my notes here, and I have it's like 3 pages worth of very extensive notes. I tried something a little different today as far as how I notated practice and came out with a lot of information that we get to go over, some of respecting the NFL's reporting policies for training camp practices. We will respect that as best as possible to make sure that I can enjoy the rest of my stay down here in South Florida and continue to have access to all the practices, the coach availabilities, the player availabilities. Tua Tagovailoa had his press conference after practice to kind of answer questions from the media about his new contract extension. We had Kendall Lamb, Kader Kohu, Jeff Wilson talk after practice. But let's start with guys who stood out. Jaylen Ramsey and Jaylen Waddle had an elite battle throughout the course of this practice between the two. Jaylen Ramsey had a nice pass breakup early. Jaylen Ramsey had another rep in one of the team periods where Jaylen Waddle had to fight through some contact early on in the rep, and Ramsey squeezed the throw and undercut and kind of came around the body of Jaylen Waddle to make a pass breakup and force a tight window throw. But Jaylen Waddle in one-on-ones had 2 really, really, really nice routes that created a lot of separation with how he ran his route stems against Jaylen Ramsey. So anytime you can have iron sharpening iron in that regard, you love watching those battles, and guys are going to win on both sides of that. And that took place throughout the entirety of the practice. Tyreek Hill had a vet rest day today. There were a number of guys that had some vet rest days. Teron Armstead, Jordan Poyer did not partake in the team period or the team and 7-on-7 type periods, which led to some elevations of some other guys to get reps next to guys that you would typically associate with being guys that are going to play for you in season, right? And that included Elijah Campbell at safety. Had a really nice play on one of the first reps of team where they threw a deep post from the far side of the field, a long developing deep post to Jaylen Waddle. And I won't get too much into the design of the play, but Waddle is the deepest option on the play, and the ball is cut loose, and Waddle makes an aggressive play on the football, and Elijah Campbell, with his coverage from playing over the top, ends up carrying that route as it emerges as a deeper threat and elevates and high points and helps break up a pass intended for Jaylen Waddle on a deep throw downfield. Reps like that for a guy who really got his first taste of being a defensive player last year. I don't think you can possibly imagine, barring injuries, and a lot of them to the safety room, that Elijah Campbell's going to get a lot of safety reps this season between Marcus May and Jordan Poyer and Javon Holland. And is Saron Neal going to be a safety? Is he going to be a nickel? Like, where does he ultimately fall? Like, there's a lot of competition in that room. But Campbell's a pretty well-tenured special teams type player who, for the second consecutive season, is showing some level of promise early in training camp with plays that extend beyond what his expected role is for the team. That's a great way to continue, especially as a young player, continue to have the team continue to invest in you and have you along for the ride. So that's an important thing for him as he continues to try to, especially with the ramped up competition for special teams reps with the new kickoff rules, have more ways to appeal to your football team. I thought Chop Robinson, once again, there's more margin for error for Chop because of the first step explosiveness every single day at practice thus far that I've been down here. He has shown a number of impact plays just because of how dynamic he is getting off the football. Now, sometimes, like Austin Jackson had a team rep where he set against Chop Robinson, and Chop got a really good first step. Might have been offsides, but it was like pushing the line. Like, hey, oh, wow, that's a really nice get off. And Austin did a nice job protecting his inside, gets hands on, and gears him down and sits him down. They said, okay, it's a really nice pass rush rep. But then there's other reps where the Dolphins try to do like a power pass or a play action where they pull a guard and he's responsible for the end man on the line of scrimmage, and the rest of the offensive line sells a certain kind of run play. And with that guard pull, he's pulling to Chop Robinson. And guess what didn't end very well for the guard pulling for Chop Robinson? He didn't get there on time because of how explosive and dynamic Chop Robinson was getting off the ball. And that's that takes me back to the preseason game last year against Houston. That happened with Will Anderson, where they tried to pull the guard and he didn't get there. And it's like, ooh, that's a real rough edge because there's no resistance there and the guy didn't get his hands on the defender. Chop had a play like that. I'm not saying he's Will Anderson, but the explosive element is going to guarantee him certain kinds of wins in certain kinds of situations. And you saw that today at practice for yet another day for Chop Robinson. Kendall Lamb actually, and Kendall Lamb's phenomenal media availability. Coming into his last year, playing to last year as a player, I had a chance to ask Kendall a question that we'll get into in the next segment, but he talked about Chop Robinson specifically and talked about him learning how to catalog his moves and counter varieties, because Kendall, as a veteran tackle, says, I'm going to give you 5 or 6 different kind of sets throughout the course of practice and show you different kinds of hands that you have to be able and ready to counter off of. And that's his maturation process, but he's good already because he's capable of being a close quarters winner because of his explosiveness and how quickly he gets on top of you. I thought that was really good insight from Kendall Lamb on Chop Robinson. Other guys that I have as winners, I thought Kendall Fuller had a nice breakup at the end of practice. He had a really physical rep in press against Eric Ezukanma early in the one-on-ones. I thought Zach Sealer looked the part in one-on-ones. Let's see. We had a couple of nice flashes by Jonathan Harris early in one of the early team sessions. They did some red zone stuff that I thought was interesting to see between things that the team you maybe wanted them to work on from last year, kind of revisiting some concepts that you saw in smatterings last year that are part of your early training camp red zone install. It's a pretty vast menu. They gave you a pretty vast menu of things that they kind of showed in the red zone. And I think the more multiple and plural that you can be, particularly in that area of the field, the more answers it gives you to be like water, like Bruce Lee said, right? Like, be like water. We can fit into a cup, or we can fit into a hand, or we can go where we need to go to have success, right? Be fluid. And the Dolphins offense showed some of that in their red zone installs already, which is a good place to be. A couple of the players to shout out. We had a player injury. We had a player come back from injury. I don't want to speculate on what the injuries for the player that got hurt, but we get a lot of stuff to get into as far as further things that happened and developments from today's practice that is coming up next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Listen, we all love sports, and this makes this time of year a little bit more difficult when some of the sports stop sporting the way that we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going all summer long whenever you want. All you have to do is open up the app and dream up bets whenever you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. I actually thought Jaylen Wright had his best practice in a couple of days as well. A couple of really nice runs, a couple of really nice dynamic cuts that he had, and ran hard. Now, obviously, there's no pads, there's not a lot of contact, if any contact at all. But the confidence of getting into a hole and hitting it with a certain level of authority is part of what makes the Dolphins' offense and running game go in the way that it does. So for him to carry some of that particular kind of urgency with his runs, I think is an important part of his pathway for early success as a member of the Dolphins offense in 2024. As far as other rookies that popped, I thought Patrick Paul had some really successful pass rush one-on-ones. His continued biggest thing is just going to be optimizing all of his length to make sure his strike timing is really clean and efficient, and the strike placement gathers more consistency as a player, and that will continue to be a work in progress. And with a little bit of fortunes for the Dolphins this year, we won't see much of Patrick Paul unless it's by design and they want to, because he is kind of the de facto fourth tackle when you consider Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson, Kendall Lamb, and then Patrick Paul. Speaking of Kendall Lamb, he had a player availability interview, and I thought what he was able to communicate when I asked him a question about his process and preparation and how he learned this earlier in the press availability, he's asked about Chop Robinson and he's asked about Patrick Paul and both of those guys. And he's highly, highly complimentary of both about what they have at their disposal and how good they're capable of being. But the thing you got to understand about Kendall Lamb is this is one of the most frank and matter-of-fact dudes on the football team. I love his perspective because he's at the end of his career. He knows this is last year and everything's just, it is what it is, right? So what do you make of it? So here's me asking Kendall Lamb explicitly about where he learned his process from and how long that took him after he was referencing the preparations of Chop Robinson and Patrick Paul as they try to set out on their own NFL careers to become successful NFL players. What was that process like for you? You talked about Chop and kind of him learning how to catalog, and you talked about Patrick. Everybody's different, but when you reflect back on your own career, what was that process like of getting comfortable with your own routine?
Well, I'll say this. The guy that I was with in Houston was Coach O'Brien, and the way we do things here is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it was very, very different when I was in Houston. You know, that's the New England style. That's everybody's there 5-10 minutes early. The phone was put on no phones in the meeting room. If it came on in the meeting room, you were dead scared. Like, it was just a different environment. Plus, it's a different state of the world. It's a different time. So it's like, from my perspective, I mean, they taught us how to be pros very, very early. You know, I was picking Dwayne Brown's mind, Derek Newton, Ben Jones. I can go down to Suafilo, Brandon Brooks. Like, I always want to see their routines. And at the same time, I had the Vince Wilforks, Whitney Merciless, J.J. Watts, Brian Cushings across the line for me, to name a few. So it's like, and I was fortunate enough to practice against them very early with the ones. So I had to learn very fast. And it's like, when you break down your film and when you talk to them, you learn, okay, you may have had a good day today, but it has nothing to do with tomorrow. You have to build your Rolodex. You have to see what worked. You have to see what didn't. And you kind of start the process all over again tomorrow. So for me, it was all about, you know, stacking good days, but being very real with yourself. Because, I mean, the film doesn't lie. So, yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I love it so much because you hear about the leadership intangibles of Teron Armstead. And now you have another player in an offensive tackle and an offensive line room that has Patrick Paul as a rookie, an uber talented rookie that will need to learn how to harness his physical abilities. A young offensive tackle who just got a second contract from the team that experienced those same hardships in how to learn to be a professional in Austin Jackson. You consider another guy on a rookie contract in that offensive line room in Liam Eichenberg, who's entering into a very pivotal fourth season for him. You consider a newly paid player that's just coming off of his rookie contract and only recently experienced success at the position he's going to be asked to play for the Dolphins, and Aaron Brewer. There's still a lot of youth in this room. We didn't mention Keon Smith. We didn't mention Robert Jones. These are all like third, fourth, fifth year guys at most. And to have somebody who has lived it, and not necessarily somebody who has lived it from a top 20 pick, capable of hit the ground running, no questions asked, a guy who has had to kind of be gritty and flexible and prepared on a moment's notice, because there's been a lot of places where he's been a utility offensive lineman and then gets the call to the bullpen to come in, and did that for Miami in a number of different games last year and was a consummate pro and played well. That kind of impact and influence, when you think about the term player development and how important it is for this Dolphins organization and what they want to be and how they want to continue to have sustained success amidst some of the big contracts that they've given out, guys like this matter. And they matter beyond the Madden element of what is your ranking for me to put into the starting lineup for you to improve the overall grade of our team. It's such a reminder to come down here and listen to Mike McDaniel talk on a daily basis, and to hear Tua Tagovailoa talk in the post-practice availability about the journey that he's been on, and to hear guys like Kendall Lamb talk about rookie teammates and what they have at their disposal and how good they can be and the process of what it's going to take for them to get there. It's so much more of a reminder to come down here and not just watch it from afar. And look, everybody can fan the way that they want to fan, but I'm also a fan of the team, right? And it's why I start with that at the beginning of every single episode. I'm a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan. I live and breathe this football team. I love this football team. And I have since I was like 6 years old. But if you flip on the TV on Sunday for 17 or 18 or hopefully more than 18 Sundays out of the year, or Thursdays or Mondays or Saturdays or whenever the Dolphins play all their games, if you just flip on the TV for game day and you watch the 3.5 hours and you get the win or the loss and that's it, that's totally fine. But to be in the weeds with it, to hear the guys talk about the part of it that's not just the avatar with the helmet on, the human being underneath of it, and understand that it's like any other organization. You're judged on your successes and your failures. Mike McDaniel said that today when he was asked about himself being tethered to Tua Tagovailoa because they paid him. He said, my successes and failures are always going to define me as a member of the team, but what do you choose to do beyond that puts you in the best position to control and dictate the results, even though sometimes you can't do that. This stuff from Kendall Lamb is another example of that for young offensive linemen. And how many of us were ready to write off Austin Jackson 12 months ago? I was like, you'd be irresponsible to bank on anything substantial from Austin Jackson. He came out and played an amazing year last year. And then you hear Austin Jackson talk with how intellectual he is and how deliberate he is about all of the things that he does. And it's just a very healthy reminder as I'm down here in the weeds with these guys as they get ready to play this season, that there is so much more to it than just 3.5 hours on a Sunday or 3.5 hours on a Thursday night or a Monday night or a Saturday. And it's cool to see the kinds of guys that they have collected, not just Kendall Lamb, right? Calais Campbell, Jordan Poyer, Jalen Ramsey, Tyreek Hill. up and down the roster, every position room. I was talking with Travis Wingfield of Drive Time, who used to be the host of Locked On Dolphins. He's now employed by the team. I was talking to him in practice. We were talking about veteran leadership. We were talking about the captains this year. Who do we think are going to be the captains? They got like a dozen guys. Have like Teron Armstead, a legitimate argument to be a captain on this football team. Raheem Mostert has an argument to be a captain on this football team. And Raheem Mostert's impression on Devon Achane and Jalen Wright in a wide zone system, that how you run the ball matters in the execution of not just the play working for you as the ball carrier, but your blockers in this scheme are dependent on you making them right. You have to learn how to do that. Really cool stuff down here in training camp for Dolphins 2024. Some injury updates coming your way next here on Locked On Dolphins. Plus a few quick thoughts on the Tua Tagovailoa press conference after practice as well. That's coming your way next. When you want to go to the game, it's not supposed to be stressful. It's important to keep that in mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime, an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier because prices on GameTime actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You could save up to 60% on tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it. And they have all-in pricing, so there's no surprises when you take the tickets and you put them into your cart. You know exactly what you're getting. There's no surprise fees, just like you know exactly what your sight lines are because they have panoramic views from your seat before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last-minute tickets for the lowest prices, guaranteed. So, do you want the good news or the bad news? The bad news, Cam Smith left today's practice with a trainer, walked back to the locker room. What it is, I don't know. It would be irresponsible and also against the NFL's reporting policies for me to speculate in any degree on what the injury was. I will say this. I personally did not see any acute incident on the field. And he was walking slowly, but it's not like the cart made an appearance or anything like that. But something to watch for a player that when the Dolphins go sub-package, are you going to be a three safety team or are you going to be a three corner team? Is that dependent week to week? Can that be dependent week to week? Who is the third corner? Kendall Fuller, I thought had a nice practice. I mentioned him earlier. He was physical with Ezukama, stayed sticky on a corner out in the red zone against, I believe it was Jaylen Waddle. So a nice variety of skills that popped. Jalen Ramsey, obviously, is going to be a massive piece of this secondary for all the places that he moves around. But when he moves inside, assuming he does move inside, who's the other guy? Is it Cater? Is it Cam? Is it Needham? Is it a safety? And you just play three safety stuff and move Javon Holland around and play with May and Poyer on the roof? Do you play Poyer down low because he did it in Buffalo the last couple of years? Like, you got a lot of stuff to figure out. And that's a good problem to have. But if you want to go coverage heavy against 11 personnel teams, the third corner is a question mark. It's one of the open spots in camp that you're battling for right now. And I thought Cam flashed 2 plays on Friday. It was kind of like the first, like, oh, there he is. This is really nice coverage on Jaylen Waddle. He wasn't getting picked on like Noah Benogany and getting deep shots all over the field on him or anything like that. But it wasn't the same pop plays. And he had pop plays in training camp last year. If he misses time, it hurts him. Because this is a time to instill confidence in the midst of the new Dolphins defensive scheme and system. I don't know that he will miss time. I'm just saying he walked off the practice field in the middle of practice today with a trainer, went back to the locker room. That's the bad news. The good news is David Long was activated before practice off of the PUP. So David Long was back, and he was on a number of plays lining up with Jordan Brooks, and the athleticism of those two is a very exciting proposition for the Dolphins, because that was an area that seemed to be a point of emphasis, and their mobility shows up already. You can see him. I've thought the linebackers, and I thought Anthony Walker was pretty good the last couple of days. Mike McDaniel said he was in one of the leading candidates for the team's beach volleyball team because he's batted a couple balls up in the air that have generated in either turnovers or near turnovers for the Dolphins defense throughout the first week of practice here at training camp, or the orange jersey already. And you get David Long back in that room. And then you're watching David Long, and you're getting down to the end of the session, and they're doing offensive mid-red zone plays. Around the 10-yard line is the mid-red zone. And it's 11 on 11, so it's team. And David Long's not in. And you're watching David Long, and this is another one of those observations that you really like seeing from guys as far as going the extra mile. He's standing directly in the middle of the end zone, just outside of the back line. So he's out of bounds. He's right underneath the uprights. And the offense breaks the huddle. Mind you, he's not in. He's not one of the 11 guys on the field. The offense breaks the huddle, and he is making points. He is pointing out players. He's emulating the calls, and then the quarterback gets ready to receive the snap, and David Long gets down into his stance, and he takes his first step with whatever way his read step is when the ball is actually snapped. The extra mile to get the reps, even when he's not in, it's another one of those things that you love to see, in the same way that on Friday's practice, you love to see Tua go up over the top and hit a deep bomb to Tyreek over Jaylen Ramsey. And then Ramsey comes up after both of the guys are subbed out, and he daps up Tua, and he emulates the ball fake that Tua did to get him to sell for the shot to go up over the top of Ramsey. It's like little things like that. There's been some really cool moments like that, and David Long had one. Speaking of Tua met with the media after practice, kind of answer questions in relation to his contract extension with the team. He was very gracious and made sure he thanked just about everybody. Darrell Bevel was there. Frank Smith was there. Mike McDaniel was there. Brandon Shore was there. Chris Greer was there. Tua's family was there with his wife and two children. And the thing that I would say about Tua, and I've said this for a while, is I do think from like a sports psychology standpoint, all of the things that Tua has gone through and how it has impacted him, and to see him come out the other side of it with a new generational wealth type of commitment from the team, you could physically see and feel what felt like the mental weight lifted off of him. Loose, jovial, had a lot of personality at the podium, where in past two oppressors is forget the ones in negotiations, and the market is the market, and very matter of fact, and I'm anxious to get something done, or the Brian Flores years, where everybody's got the pictures of him and the Zoom calls for the media sessions, and it's just this facial expression look of disgust. And then Mike comes in, and it reinvigorates his career, but it always kind of felt like there was the questions lingering over him. And it feels like with the contract extension and the new commitment from the team, some of that has been lifted. And I think for Tua specifically, and some of this is speculation on my part, I think when he plays his best football, and this part shouldn't be a hot take, when he plays his best football, it's when he's most confident. And if you can bottle the confidence that he has coming off of this investment from the team, and he can proudly feel that all season long, I think you have a chance to see the best version of Tua this year. It was I was startled when he came in and he starts talking and he starts answering questions, and the feel of it was different in a good way for him. So I'm excited to see what that feels like as we continue onward. That is going to do it for us here on this training camp recap for Sunday, July 28th, 2024. Training camp practice in the books. We have practices the next 2 days as well. I hope you will join me back here. We're on the YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We may have some other stuff coming your way in addition, so hit subscribe, follow along. Hope to see you then. Make it a great rest of your day. Go Dolphins. I'm out of here.